The nervous system and its defenses. We're going to describe the important anatomical features of the nervous system, list the natural defenses that are present in the nervous system. Chapter 19. The two component parts of the nervous system are the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which include the nerves emanating from the brain and spinal cord to the sense organs and then to the periphery of the body. We have sensory receptors at the ends of the peripheral nerves that generate nerve impulses transmitted to the CNS, central nervous system, and integrative transmits impulses into sensation or thought and drives motor function. Motor involves muscles and glands. The brain and spinal cord are made up of neurons surrounded by bone. The brain is inside the skull. The spinal cord is inside the spinal column. Light. The brain is surrounded by meninges, the dura mater, the arachnoid matter, and pia mater. The cerebrospinal fluid fills the subarachnoid space. It's clear serum-like fluid. It provides nutrition to the CNS. It provides a liquid cushion for the brain and spinal cord. Meningitis is an infection of the meninges. So here we're talking about the infectious diseases of the nervous system, and meningitis is an infection of the meninges. The structure of the peripheral nervous system, the ganglia is swelling in the nerve where cell bodies of neurons congregate. The nerves are bundles of neuronal axons that transmit nerve signals. These axons and dendrites of adjacent neurons communicate over a synapse. Neurotransmitters released from one cell act on the next cell in the synapse. The defenses of the nervous system are mainly structural. There are bony casings of the brain and spinal cord that protect them from traumatic energy. I think that should be injury. The CSF serves as a cushion against impact. Then we have the blood-brain barrier. Have you all seen the new type of helmets that the football players can wear that protects them from concussions? The blood-brain barrier, cells that make up the walls of blood vessels around the brain, allow very few molecules to pass through. They are freer passage of ions, sugars, and other metabolites in other areas of the body. And it prohibits most microorganisms from passing into the CNS. Drugs and antibiotics are difficult to introduce into the CNS when needed. The immune privilege of the CNS. A different or partial immune response when exposed to immunologic challenge. The functions of the CNS are vital for the life of an organism, and temporary damage from a normal immune response could be detrimental. Cells in the CNS express lower levels of MHC antigens, lower quantities of complement proteins. There are specialized immune cells in the CNS, like the microglial cells display phagocytic activity. Phagocyte, what's the phagocyte going to do? All right, it's going to eat. It's going to gobble up. Brain macrophages exist in the CNS. The activity of both types of cells is less than that of phagocytic cells elsewhere in the body. So, answer these questions. Going down the road. Miss on this side. Miss Sankori. The CNS consists of what? Thank you, Miss Sankori. Miss Archie. The PNS consists of, okay, we said the CNS, the brain and spinal cord, and the PNS, PNS, the peripheral nervous system, consists of what, Miss Archie? Nerves emanating from the brain and spinal cord to sense organs to the periphery of the body. The three layers of the meninges are the what kind of matter? Matter and matter. Thank you, Mister. The blank barrier restricts certain molecules and microbes from entering into the CNS, Ms. de Guzman. All right. The lessened immune response in the brain is known as what? Number 4. Miss Ma'am, Miss Slaughter, Miss Gregg, Miss Vogt. Number 4 up here. Miss Amechi, Miss Bartlett. All right. So what is the normal biota of the nervous system? Do we have any? It is still believed that the CNS and PNS lack normal biota of any kind. Finding microorganisms of any type in these tissues represents a deviation from a healthy state. Certain viruses live in a dormant state in the nervous system between episodes of acute disease. An example is what Mr. Smith's group is going to tell us about when they do their group presentation. Herpes simplex viruses. This is not considered normal biota. Information from the Human Microbiome Project is revealing a potential link between the gut microbiome and the nervous system. Gut microbiota may induce CNS autoimmunity. It appears to cause changes in the brain chemistry and behavior. A phenomenon is known as the gut-brain axis. Gut-brain axis? So in the nervous system, what are the defenses of the nervous system? Bony structures, the blood-brain barrier, microglial cells, and macrophages. Is there any normal biota in the nervous system? No. Take number 1, Miss Malingi. There is no normal biota in the central nervous system. There is not any. It's not, if you have some microbes in your central nervous system, that's not normal. There is no normal biota. What kind of virus may live in a dormant state in neurons? Say it again. What did we just, herpes simplex viruses. It could be 1, 2, maybe even 3. Herpes simplex. Miss Pruitt. The gut microbiota has an influence on the nervous system and brain chemistry. Correct. So let's look at some of these diseases. We already talked about meningitis. It's an inflammation of the meninges. There are different microbes that cause meningitis and produce a similar constellation of syndromes. Non-infectious causes of meningitis exist as well, but are less common. There are some serious forms of acute meningitis that are caused by bacteria. Entrance into the CNS is facilitated by co-infection or previous infection with respiratory viruses. When meningitis is suspected, there's a lumbar puncture to obtain CSF. What is CSF? Cerebrospinal fluid. There's a Gram stain. You know what a Gram stain is. You could even do it, couldn't you? And or a culture of the CSF. You begin treatment with a broad spectrum antibiotic with a shift in treatment after a diagnosis has been confirmed. Meningitis has the following typical symptoms, regardless of the cause: photophobia, headache, painful or stiff neck, fever, increased white blood cells in the CSF. Whenever there's an increase in white blood cells, there's some issue going on anyway, isn't there? Because what do the white blood cells do? There are certain microorganisms that may cause additional characteristic symptoms. It can manifest as acute or chronic disease. Some organisms are more likely to cause acute meningitis and others cause chronic. In a healthy person, it's difficult for microorganisms to gain access to the nervous system. Successful organisms have specific virulence factors. Neisseria meningitidis. It's a gram-negative diplococci. Does that look like a diplococci? What's diplo about it? You see two of them. It's cocci, it's spherical. It's also known as meningococcus. Associated with epidemic forms of meningitis, causes the most serious form, responsible for 25% of all meningitis cases. A polysaccharide capsule protects against phagocytosis. So our body would just gobble it up, but it has something that prevents that. Dissemination of the meningococcus from a nasopharyngeal infection. Here you see the meninges. Here is that cerebrospinal fluid, your nasal cavity, your palate, and the initial infection site right there. This poor baby. Meningitis, pathogenesis, and virulence factors. Meningococcemia. It's rare, but it has a high mortality rate. Endotoxin acts as a potent white blood cell stimulator. There is damage to blood vessels caused by cytokines released by white blood cell, leads to vascular collapse. Vascular collapse. What happens then? Collapse, vascular. Hemorrhage and crops of red or purple lesions called petechiae on the trunk and appendages. So look at this child's thigh. And is that the right foot over there? Okay. In meningitis oxidase test. What do you think they did? Did they put some of that child's cerebrospinal fluid on this petri dish? Did they put it in the incubator? What did they do to get this oxidase test right here? Streptococcus pneumoniae. It's also referred to as pneumococcus. It causes the majority of bacterial pneumonias. Most frequent cause of community-acquired meningitis, does not cause petechiae. I've seen people with meningitis before, and all I can really remember is that my friend was laying on the bed and her neck was back like this and she couldn't bring it back up. She didn't have that petechiae. Most likely to occur in patients with underlying susceptibility. Carriage rates exceed 30% in some populations. S. pneumoniae. Small gram-positive flattened coccus that appears in end-to-end pairs. It's a distinctive appearance in a gram stain of CSF. Has a polysaccharide capsule that protects against phagocytosis, produces an alpha hemolysin and hydrogen peroxide, both of which have been shown to induce damage in the CNS. And it is resistant to penicillin, cephalosporins, and macrolide antibiotics. 3 vaccines are available. Haemophilus influenzae is a gram-negative coccobacillus. It causes one of the most severe forms of meningitis in humans. It's often called HIV because serotype B is the most common cause of infection. Vaccination has reduced asymptomatic carriage rates and has virtually eliminated HIV in the United States. Listeria monocytogenes. It's a gram-positive. It ranges in the morphology from Coccobacilli to long filaments in palisade formation. If you look at this listeria here, you can see that it is, you can see kind of cocci, but you see the long line, the stem from it looks like bacilli. It has 1 to 4 flagella. The flagella help it to do what? Move. Does not produce capsules or endospores. Is not fastidious, resistant to cold, heat, salt, pH extremes, and bile. And it grows inside host cells and moves directly from an infected cell to an adjacent healthy cell. Listeriosis is mild in healthy adults. It causes meningitis and septicemia in the elderly, immunocompromised fetuses, and neonates. So it's the old people and the babies. Bacterium can cross the placenta and cause premature abortion and fetal death, and it's associated with contaminated dairy products, poultry, and meat. Cryptococcus neoformans, fungus that causes chronic meningitis with a gradual onset of symptoms. In AIDS patients, it has a fast onset and acute disease. It's widespread in human habitats. It's spherical to avoid shape with large capsules, and transmitted in bird droppings. Bird droppings. When you go out to your car in the morning, do you have bird droppings on there? I do. I can't get in my garage, that's why. Coccidioids. It's called valley fever. It's a fungus with a distinctive morphology. 25 degrees Celsius, moist white to brown colony with abundant branching. At 37 to 40 degrees Celsius, it has that is the parasitic phase. True systemic fungal infection of high virulence. Virulence means what? How potent is it? How pathogenic is it? How bad is it? Genetic susceptibility gives rise to more serious disease. And this mainly occurs, it's highly endemic, and it is found in northern Mexico, Central and South America, and the American Southwest, especially in Arizona. Why do you suppose that is? Because Arizona is so close to the Mexican border. 4 or 5 meningitis cases are caused by one of a wide variety of viruses. Aseptic meningitis is assumed when a patient shows symptoms of meningitis, but no bacteria or fungi are found in the CSF. The majority of the cases are in children. 90% is caused by enteroviruses. HSV2, this is yours, mister, is sometimes known to cause meningitis. You in this slaughter. Other herpes viruses, they're not going to tell us about all of these, are you? HHV6, remember now, speak 3 to 4 minutes each. HHV6, 7, and 3. Arboviruses, arenaviruses, adenoviruses, and HIV can manifest as meningitis as well. Viral meningitis, too, is generally milder than bacterial or fungal meningitis, and it's usually resolved in 2 weeks. The mortality rate is less than 1%. So here is a whole disease table on meningitis here, with the causative organisms of Neisseria meningitidis, Streptococcus pneumoniae, and Haemophilus influenzae. Listeria monocytogenes and Cryptococcus neoformans. There's a K1 strain of E. coli that's the second most common cause of neonatal meningitis. So it's most common in premature babies, and the prognosis is poor, 20% mortality rate. Brain damage is among those who survive. Say that word, Chronobacter sakazaki. Meningoencephalitis. What is encephalitis itself is just an inflammation of the brain. But because of the close association of the brain and spinal cord, infection of one structure may involve the other. Amoebas cause meningoencephalitis. This is one that my Friday class has to do a case study on. Naegleria fowleri, acanthamoeba. These Naegleria fowleri likes warm water. Freshwater rivers, lakes, streams, you go swimming in it, or just bathing in it, or whatever you do, you might get this amoeba that eats at your brain. There was a case of it in Louisiana, but none of the people who had it, 2 people in specific, and both of them died. It has a very high mortality rate. So how did they get it if they didn't get it from freshwater lakes and streams? They didn't go swimming. Now, if you go swimming in those kind of lakes, you obviously need to wear what? Goggles? How do you need to keep it from getting up your nose? What is it called, ma'am? Yeah, pinch your nose and not swim there, but there is some kind of a little device that you could. Yes. But these 2 people both had sinus problems, and they had washed their sinuses out with a neti pot. You know what a neti pot is? N-E-T-I. So where do you think they got the amoeba from? But they had to put the water. So this water came from your regular tap water. You turn it on in the kitchen. That was the first time they had ever discovered that amoeba can be in your water your tap water that you turn on in the sink. That's a little scary thought. I'm glad I don't have sinus trouble, but I can't hardly stand to put anything up my nose or anywhere like that anyway. I probably would just, I don't know, suffer maybe. I'm sorry. Naegleria fowleri enters the subarachnoid space, causing primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, called PAM. It causes rapid, massive destruction of brain and spinal tissue. Cases are rare, but the disease advances so rapidly that treatment is futile. Only 3 cases of 133 have ever survived. Then we have acanthamoeba. It has a course of infection that's lengthier than PAM. And here is the disease table. You can have acute encephalitis. It's almost always caused by a viral infection. Behavior changes or confusion due to inflammation, decreased consciousness, and seizure symptoms of meningitis, and treatment is usually with acyclovir. Arboviruses are transmitted by arthropod vectors. What's an arthropod? Worldwide distribution, clustered in the tropics and subtropics, periodic epidemics in temperate zones. Most vectors feed on the blood of hosts. So what would be an example of an arthropod that feeds on the blood of hosts? Mosquito. What about a fly? Does a fly feed on your blood? It doesn't. Yes. Millions of infections per year and thousands of people die. West Nile encephalitis. When West Nile virus with the West Nile mosquitoes was first talked about, mosquitoes really love me, so I don't know if the mosquito has West Nile virus or not. One was discovered in Tuscaloosa, so I just thought I shouldn't sit on my back porch anymore, because I get eaten by mosquitoes. And so how do I know if it had West Nile virus? I don't. So we have some other ones called viruses that are called La Crosse, Jamestown Canyon, and Powassan viruses. Where do you think they got those names from, like Jamestown? Right, maybe where they were first discovered even. Eastern equine encephalitis. Here are transmission cycles and geographic distributions of the top 5 arboviruses causing encephalitis in the United States. West Nile, you can see, comes from a mosquito or a bird. What about La Crosse virus? Looks like a mosquito, some arthropod. And what is this right here? A rodent. I don't know, is it a rat? Rat doesn't have a long tail. A squirrel? Jamestown Canyon virus. What is this right here? Comes from an arthropod or a deer. Powassan, that looks like a roach. A bear? Did you see a bear? An eastern equine comes from either an arthropod or a bird. Herpes simplex, caused most commonly by HSV1, represents a reactivation of dormant HSV from the trigeminal ganglion. In subacute encephalitis, the symptoms take longer to show up and are less striking. Common causes: toxoplasma, persistent measles infection. Toxoplasma gondii. It's a flagellated parasite. It's usually asymptomatic. And a 33% chance of the mother transmitting the infection to the fetus if she gets it during pregnancy. Measles virus, subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. It shows a virus infection. And these symptoms appear years after the initial measles episode. Is measles totally eradicated in the United States? No. But because of so many people having the vaccination, we have something called herd immunity. The herd is immune to it because they've been vaccinated, and you little one person who has not been vaccinated can benefit from the fact that everybody around you has had the prions, proteinaceous infectious particles. Here are some microscopic effects of spongiform encephalopathy. You see these little spongiform lesions right here? There are your glial cells, there's a neuron, and then there's these lesions. That's how it shows up under the microscope. Rabies. It's a progressive zoonotic disease characterized by fatal encephalitis. Furious rabies, dumb rabies, the patient is paralyzed, disoriented, and stuporous. I was bitten by a dog once. I was so scared of dogs. That's why my own puppy died, because I was scared of it. But I was actually bitten and had to go take those rabies shots. Oof. This is the structure of the rabies virus. What do we know? What are these little things called here? Spikes. Glycoprotein spikes. We talked about spikes on viruses. A reservoir for rabies is wild mammals such as canines, skunks, raccoons, badgers, cats, and bats. But now, this dog that I was bitten by wasn't wild. He belonged to somebody. Rabies in the United States. They have it caused by skunks, raccoons. So what is it mostly caused by in Alabama? The yellow. Raccoons. What is it mostly caused by in Texas and Arizona? Foxes. Okay. Right here, the purple is fox. What about up here in the blue? All the Midwestern states. Skunk. You ever smelled the skunk when he was letting off his odor? To prevent rabies, it is imperative that treatment begins after exposure and before symptoms develop. Passive and active post-exposure immunization and vaccination of domestic animals. The vaccine is incorporated into bait to treat wild animals. Here is the disease table. Poliomyelitis is an acute enteroviral infection of the spinal cord. Signs and symptoms, poliomyelitis. Here is the viral capsid. Do you see any spikes on it? If this capsid was 20-sided, it would be called, it's on the final. What is the shape? Back to exam 1. A 20-sided. Okay. I'm telling you it's on the final. Okay. Icosahedral. All right. It is time for us to close. Tetanus. I want to hit this one though. Clostridium tetani. It's the common resident of soil and GI tracts of animals. Gram-positive endospore forming rod. Endospores are only produced under anaerobic conditions, which means they are only produced in the absence of oxygen. Tetanospasmin. You can see here, it binds to target sites on peripheral motor neurons on the spinal cord, brain, and sympathetic nervous system. Blocks inhibition of muscle contraction, causing muscles to contract uncontrollably, resulting in spastic paralysis. Death results from paralysis of respiratory muscles and respiratory arrest. Poor little baby has neonatal tetanus. Probably won't. Tetanus prevention is one of the world's most preventable diseases. Do we have a tetanus vaccine? Do our little children have to take it before they go to school? Botulism, caused by an exotoxin associated with eating poorly preserved foods. What did I tell y'all about Denny Moore beef stew? It had botulinum toxin. Once upon a time, a long time ago, They have fixed that problem now. African sleeping sickness. Do you know what that is? It lives in the blood and tissues of the human host, affects millions of individuals in 36 countries in Africa. It's transmitted by the tsetse fly. Somebody tell me if I'm pronouncing this word right. Okay? I won't. All right, we will close out for today and go to lab. In lab today, I am going to give you your very last lab that you're going to do on your own time by going to the cdc.gov website and looking up your disease. Okay? So, and we don't have to take 15 minutes here. We can just stop